The moment an alpha abandons power for the truth, someone far more dangerous starts paying attention. At exactly 4:17 in the morning, I woke to the faint vibration of a phone that refused to stop ringing. My neck ached from sleeping upright on the worn fabric couch, and for a few confused seconds I forgot where I was. Then the scent of freshly brewed coffee mixed with cedar and winter air pulled me back to reality. Adrian Callahan was still there. He hadn't left. He sat in the wooden chair beside my apartment door exactly where I had last seen him, his expensive black suit jacket draped over one shoulder, one hand loosely holding a mug that had long since gone cold. The first pale light of dawn slipped through the narrow window above the sink, painting silver lines across the floor. His phone lit up again. Another incoming call. Another ignored one. I slowly reached for my own phone lying on the coffee table. The screen exploded with notifications before I even unlocked it. News alerts. Social media headlines. Financial reporters. Every headline carried the same impossible sentence. Callahan and Whitmore wedding cancelled overnight. My pulse stumbled. I looked from the screen back to Adrian, searching his calm expression for some sign that this was a mistake. There wasn't one. He simply watched the city outside my apartment as if nothing extraordinary had happened. "What did you do?" My voice sounded smaller than I intended. Adrian finally looked at me. His grey eyes were tired, but for the first time since we had met, they weren't guarded. "I believed you." Those 3 words settled over the room heavier than silence itself. I stared at him, unable to answer. 12 hours earlier, he had been the most untouchable alpha in Chicago, hours away from marrying into one of the city's most powerful families. Now every television station was calling it the biggest business scandal of the year. And somehow it had started inside my tiny apartment that barely had enough space for 2 people to stand comfortably. My fingers tightened around the phone. "You cancelled everything, because of me." Adrian shook his head once. "Not because of you. Because of the truth you refused to sell." Before I could respond, another call flashed across his screen. "Marcus Reed." Adrian declined it without hesitation. A second later, another message arrived. "Urgent. The board is demanding a statement." He ignored that one too. The apartment felt impossibly quiet despite the constant buzzing of our phones. Outside, delivery trucks rolled through the narrow street below, and someone walked a golden retriever past the corner bakery as if the entire city hadn't just changed overnight. I couldn't understand how Adrian remained so calm. "You should leave," I whispered. "They're going to blame you." His eyes met mine again, steady and unreadable. "They already are." "Then why are you still here?" For the first time since dawn, something almost resembling a smile appeared at the corner of his mouth. "Because whoever searched this apartment yesterday didn't stop looking simply because I cancelled a wedding." The word sent a chill through me. My gaze drifted toward the burned edge of the envelope still resting on the kitchen counter. The documents inside had already destroyed one future. I suddenly wondered how many more they were capable of destroying. Adrian stood slowly, crossed the room, and picked up the envelope before handing it back to me. "Keep it," he said quietly. "Today, everyone will assume this story is about a wedding." His expression hardened as another notification illuminated his phone. "They're wrong. It started the moment I opened your door." 8 months earlier, the envelope had almost disappeared forever. I held it carefully, running my fingers across the blackened edge where the paper had curled from the heat. Adrian remained silent, giving me enough space to decide whether I was finally ready to tell him everything. I drew a slow breath before looking down at the faded handwriting on the front. Daniel Hayes. My brother had always written my name with careful block letters because he believed people trusted neat handwriting more than beautiful handwriting. The memory almost made me smile. Almost. "Daniel never wanted to work for the Whitmores," I said quietly. "He only accepted the job because they offered enough money to pay for our mother's medical bills." Adrian did not interrupt. He simply listened. That surprised me more than anything else about him. Men with his reputation usually filled every silence with commands. Adrian seemed to understand that some truths arrived only when silence was left undisturbed. He worked in their accounting division, I continued. Nothing glamorous. Just numbers, reports, tax records, financial transfers. He always said numbers never lied. People did. I carefully opened the envelope. Inside were several folded pages, a photograph with smoke stains around the edges, and a small flash drive no bigger than my thumb. Adrian studied each item without reaching for any of them. 3 weeks before he disappeared, I said, Daniel started acting differently. He stopped calling every day. He checked the locks twice before going to bed. He even replaced the batteries in every smoke detector because he said people ignored the obvious when they were afraid. My voice caught for a moment. The night before he vanished, he came here carrying this envelope. Adrian's expression remained steady, but his attention sharpened. He told me that if anyone ever came asking questions, I was supposed to deny knowing anything. Then he said something I have never forgotten. I swallowed hard before repeating the exact words. If powerful people suddenly become interested in ordinary lives, it is because ordinary people accidentally found something extraordinary. Adrian slowly nodded. What did he find? I unfolded the first document and placed it on the coffee table between us. It looked harmless enough. Wire transfers. Company names. Routine business expenses. Nothing that would frighten anyone who did not know where to look. The first time I saw these papers, I thought they were meaningless too, I admitted. Then Daniel showed me the dates. Adrian leaned forward slightly. His eyes moved across the page before stopping on one column. The transfers had all been completed exactly 48 hours before major corporate acquisitions announced by Callahan Industries and Whitmore Holdings. Somebody knew every business decision before the public did, Adrian said. Quietly. Yes. And somebody made millions from that information. I nodded. Daniel believed it was bigger than insider trading. He said somebody inside both organizations had been quietly moving money through shell companies for years. Adrian remained perfectly still. Why did he trust you with this? I looked toward the apartment window where the morning sun had fully risen above the neighboring buildings. Because he knew I would never sell it. A faint vibration interrupted us. This time it was my phone. Unknown number. No voicemail. The call ended before I could answer. A second later another message appeared from another unknown number. Stop looking backward if you want tomorrow to arrive. I felt the color drain from my face. Adrian calmly held out his hand. Without thinking, I passed him the phone. He read the message once before locking the screen. They know these documents still exist, I whispered. No, Adrian replied in an even voice that somehow made the room feel colder. They know you still exist. Before I could answer, his own phone vibrated again. Marcus had finally reached him, but this time there was only one sentence waiting on the screen. Richard Whitmore has disappeared from the wedding venue, and nobody knows where he went. For the next several seconds neither of us spoke. Adrian kept his eyes on the message from Marcus while I stared at the envelope resting between us, suddenly realizing it no longer represented the past. Somehow, it had become the center of everything happening today. Richard Whitmore had vanished only hours after the wedding was cancelled. That could have meant many things, but none of them felt accidental. Adrian placed his phone face down on the table before looking directly at me. Tell me exactly how many people knew Daniel left these documents with you. I searched my memory carefully. Only Daniel and me. At least, that is what I believed. Adrian folded his arms. Believed? I nodded slowly. The night he came here, someone followed him. Adrian did not react outwardly, but I noticed his attention sharpen again. I never saw the person's face. Daniel looked through the blinds 3 different times before. He knocked on my door. He even turned off every light in the apartment before speaking to me. I walked toward the window and looked down at the quiet street below. Morning traffic had begun filling the neighborhood. Parents walked children toward school. Delivery vans stopped outside nearby businesses. Ordinary life continued only a few stories beneath us, completely unaware that the balance between two powerful families might already be shifting. Daniel kept saying he was running out of time. I continued. I asked him what he meant, but he only smiled and told me that numbers always leave footprints. Adrian stood and joined me near the window. He was right. I looked at him. You believe him? Adrian answered without hesitation. Someone spent years building a financial network nobody was supposed to notice. People who invest that much effort do not suddenly walk away. His phone buzzed once more. This time he answered immediately. Marcus. I could not hear the voice on the other end, but Adrian's expression remained calm as he listened. Lock every internal account. Suspend all executive approvals until I return. Nobody signs anything today. Another pause followed. No. Do not involve the board yet. I want verification before speculation. He ended the call and slipped the phone back into his pocket. Marcus found something. I asked. Adrian nodded once. Several financial authorizations scheduled for this morning disappeared from the system less than an hour ago. Disappeared? Someone deleted them before anyone else could review them. My stomach tightened. Daniel had warned me that evidence could vanish faster than people. At the time I thought he was exaggerating. Now I understood exactly what he meant. Adrian walked back toward the coffee table and carefully examined the smoke-stained photograph without touching it. It showed Daniel standing beside several employees outside a downtown office building. At first glance nothing seemed unusual, but Adrian focused on the reflection in the glass doors behind them. Who is that? He asked quietly. I leaned closer. Reflected in the polished entrance was a tall man wearing a charcoal overcoat. His face was blurred by sunlight, but one detail stood out clearly. A silver wolf pin fastened to his lapel. I felt my heartbeat quicken. Daniel circled that pin with a pen before he gave me the envelope, I whispered. Adrian looked at me. Did he explain why? No. He only said if anything ever happened to him, I should remember the man with the silver wolf. Adrian remained silent for several moments before reaching into his wallet. He removed an old business card and turned it over. Printed in one corner was the same silver wolf emblem. This symbol does not belong to the Whitmores, he said. It belongs to a private organization that has quietly advised the most influential families in Chicago for decades. What kind of organization? I asked. Adrian's voice grew noticeably lower. One that officially does not exist. Before either of us could speak again, 3 slow knocks echoed through my apartment door. Neither of us had heard footsteps in the hallway. Neither of us was expecting anyone. Adrian looked through the peephole without making a sound. When he stepped back, his expression had changed for the first time since entering my apartment. Do not open the envelope, he said softly. Vanessa Whitmore is standing outside alone. Adrian held one finger to his lips before unlocking the apartment door only halfway. I remained where I was, clutching the envelope against my chest without realizing it. Vanessa Whitmore stood alone in the hallway wearing a simple navy coat instead of the designer dress every news station had expected to see that morning. There was no security detail behind her, no photographers, no assistants. Only a small leather handbag rested against her shoulder, and despite her composed posture, there was an unmistakable exhaustion in her eyes. She looked nothing like the woman whose cancelled wedding had become the biggest headline in Chicago. May I come in? She asked quietly. Adrian did not move. You should not be here. Vanessa gave a tired smile that disappeared almost immediately. Neither should you. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The silence between them felt older than today, as though it had existed long before either of them agreed to a marriage they never truly wanted. Adrian finally stepped aside just enough to let her enter. She walked into the apartment slowly, her gaze moving across the modest living room before settling on me. "So you are Elliot." I nodded cautiously. "I imagined someone different," she admitted. "That is probably because my father described you as a threat instead of a person." Adrian closed the door behind her. "Why are you here, Vanessa?" She turned toward him without hesitation. "Because if I waited another hour, someone else would arrive first." The room immediately grew quieter. Adrian studied her face carefully. "Richard disappeared." "I know." "Where is he?" Vanessa looked away toward the kitchen window. "If I knew, I would not have come here." I noticed her hands were trembling ever so slightly as she removed a folded envelope from her handbag. She placed it gently on the coffee table without opening it. "My father left this in my room before sunrise." Adrian did not touch it. "Read it." Vanessa unfolded the letter herself. Her voice remained steady despite the weight of every word. "If Adrian Callahan refuses the marriage, retrieve the Hayes documents before nightfall. Do not allow the Omega to disappear. Failure will destroy everything our family has built." My heartbeat echoed in my ears. She lowered the paper and looked directly at me. "Until this morning, I had never heard your name." Adrian's expression hardened. "Richard involved you without your knowledge." Vanessa nodded once. "He involved everyone without their knowledge." I searched her face for anger, jealousy, resentment, anything that matched the story every reporter would soon invent. Instead, I found only disappointment. "Why tell us this?" I asked carefully. She answered almost immediately. "Because I spent the last 3 years believing I was preparing for a marriage that would stabilize 2 families." She let out a slow breath. "Now I know I was preparing for a transaction built on lies." Adrian finally reached for the letter, reading every line in silence. When he finished, he folded it neatly before returning it to Vanessa. "You could have destroyed this." She gave a faint, weary smile. "If I wanted to protect my father, I would never have walked through your door." Her phone suddenly vibrated. She glanced at the screen, and all remaining color left her face. "It is my father's private number," she whispered. Adrian held out his hand. "Answer it." Vanessa placed the call on speaker. For several long seconds there was only static. Then a calm male voice filled the apartment. It was not Richard Whitmore. "Miss Whitmore," the stranger said politely, "thank you for leading us to Mr. Hayes." Every instinct in my body froze. Adrian immediately looked toward the apartment window instead of the phone. "How did they know you were coming here?" he asked. Vanessa slowly lowered the device, horror spreading across her face as realization settled in. "I never told anyone," she whispered. Adrian's voice became perfectly calm, which somehow frightened me more than panic would have. "You did not have to. Someone has been watching all 3 of us since before sunrise." No one moved for several seconds after the call ended. The apartment felt smaller than ever, as though the walls themselves had begun listening. Vanessa slowly lowered her phone onto the coffee table, her hands no longer trembling from fear but from the realization that every decision she had made that morning had already been anticipated by someone else. Adrian walked toward the front window without pulling back the curtain. Instead, he studied the faint reflection in the glass. "If they wanted the documents immediately," he said quietly, "they would not have warned us first." I looked at him, confused. "Then why call?" Adrian finally turned around. "Because someone wants us to know we are being watched. Fear makes people predictable." His words settled heavily in my mind. Daniel had once said something similar after teaching me how to solve chess puzzles on rainy weekends. The player who controls your fear usually controls your next move. Suddenly that old memory no longer felt comforting. It felt like a warning that had arrived too late. Adrian removed his phone and dialed Marcus. The call connected almost instantly. "I need a complete security sweep," Adrian said calmly. "Not around." "My office." "Around Elliot's apartment building." He listened for several seconds before speaking again. No marked vehicles. No uniforms. If someone is observing this location, I do not want them disappearing before we identify them. He ended the call and slipped the phone into his pocket. Vanessa watched him with quiet curiosity. You are protecting him before protecting your company. Adrian answered without hesitation. My company can recover from financial damage. Dead evidence cannot. I noticed he deliberately chose the word evidence instead of witness. Somehow that made me trust him even more. He still viewed everything logically, but he no longer treated me like another file inside a business investigation. A sudden knock echoed somewhere above us. All three of us instinctively looked toward the ceiling. It was followed by another sound. Furniture being dragged across the floor in the apartment upstairs. I frowned. Mrs. Donnelly never rearranges furniture during the day. Adrian looked at me immediately. You know your neighbor's routines. Most of them, I admitted. The couple next door leaves for work at 8:15 every morning. The man across the hall waters his plants before breakfast. Mrs. Donnelly watches old movies every Tuesday until noon. Vanessa blinked. You notice all of that? I shrugged. Quiet people usually notice things because nobody notices us. Adrian's expression softened almost imperceptibly. What about today? I listened carefully. The scraping sound stopped. Then came slow footsteps overhead. Too heavy. Too deliberate. Mrs. Donnelly was 78 years old. She shuffled when she walked. Whoever was upstairs now moved with steady confidence. That is not her, I whispered. Adrian nodded once. I thought so. He crossed the apartment in 3 silent steps and locked the deadbolt before checking the back entrance that opened onto the narrow fire escape. Everything remained undisturbed, but he did not seem reassured. Vanessa walked toward the kitchen and looked out through the small window facing the alley. There is a black sedan parked behind the building, she said. Engine running. I joined her carefully without. Standing directly in front of the glass. The car blended naturally with the other vehicles, but one detail caught my attention. The driver had not looked at a phone, a newspaper, or even the traffic once. He simply watched the building. He has been there since before I arrived, Vanessa whispered. Adrian looked toward us without changing his calm expression. Then we are already behind. My phone suddenly vibrated again. This time it was not another unknown number. It was an old email account I had not opened in almost a year. The subject line contained only 3 words. Do not trust. I opened it with unsteady hands. Inside was a single photograph attached without any message. It showed Daniel standing outside the same office building as before, smiling directly at the camera. Nothing unusual until I noticed the date stamped in the corner. The photograph had been taken only 6 days ago. I stared at the image until my vision blurred. That is impossible, I whispered. Daniel disappeared 8 months ago. Adrian stepped beside me and studied the photograph in silence. Then he looked back at the apartment door. No, he said quietly. Someone wants us to believe he disappeared. Those are 2 very different things. The memory would not let go of me. I could still picture the printed notice tape beside the apartment mailboxes. Routine safety inspection. Estimated entry time between 9 o'clock and noon. I had barely glanced at it because nothing about it seemed unusual. The building manager had smiled, apologized for the inconvenience, and reminded everyone to leave clear access to the smoke detectors. I had returned home that evening, looked around for less than a minute, and convinced myself everything was exactly as I had left it. I had been wrong. Adrian walked slowly through the apartment, his attention moving from bookshelf to window frame, from ceiling vent to electrical outlet. He touched nothing else. He only observed. It reminded me of the way Daniel used to solve difficult math problems. He always claimed the answer appeared only after you stopped staring directly at it. Vanessa remained near the kitchen, unusually quiet. Finally she spoke. If someone entered pretending to inspect the apartment, they had access to every home in this building. Adrian nodded once. Which means Elliot was probably never the original target. I looked toward him in confusion. What do you mean? He stopped beside the dining table where Daniel's documents remained untouched. Think about the timing. 8 months ago your brother disappears. 3 weeks ago someone installs a listening device. 6 days ago someone sends us a recent photograph. Every move pushes us toward one conclusion. I felt the answer forming before he spoke it aloud. Daniel was expected to come back. Adrian met my eyes. Or someone believed he eventually would. The realization settled heavily over me. Whoever had hidden that microphone may never have been listening for me at all. They had been waiting for my brother. Waiting to hear his voice if he ever returned home. My phone buzzed softly against the table. This time it was not another anonymous message. It was an alert from my apartment building. The scheduled residents' meeting for that evening had been cancelled due to unexpected maintenance. I frowned. That is strange. Adrian extended his hand. May I? I passed him the phone. He read the notification carefully before asking, has this building cancelled meetings before? Never, I answered. Mrs. Donnelly complains if they even start 5 minutes late. Adrian looked toward the hallway. Someone does not want the residents gathering in one place today. Vanessa slowly folded her father's letter and slipped it back into her handbag. That means whatever happens next needs everyone isolated. The apartment suddenly felt much quieter than before. Even the sounds from neighboring units had faded away. I walked to the window and cautiously looked through a narrow gap between the curtains. The black sedan behind the building was gone. In its place stood a white maintenance van parked beside the alley entrance. 2 workers wearing identical grey uniforms unloaded toolboxes onto the sidewalk. Everything about them appeared ordinary except for one detail. Neither of them entered the building. They simply waited beside the open van doors while occasionally looking toward the entrance. Adrian, I said softly. He joined me without standing directly beside the window. After only one glance he nodded. They are not maintenance workers. How can you tell? Vanessa asked. Adrian answered immediately. Their toolboxes are too clean. Real technicians leave scratches on metal cases. Those boxes have never been used. A quiet chime interrupted us. The apartment intercom had activated downstairs. 3 short tones echoed through the speaker mounted beside my front door. Then a polite voice filled the room. Building maintenance. We are conducting a follow-up inspection requested by property management. We will begin with apartment 312. My apartment number. I looked at Adrian, my pulse racing. He did not move toward the intercom. Instead, he calmly removed the small microphone from his pocket and placed it beside Daniel's envelope. Now we know why they warned us, he said. They were never trying to scare us into running. His steady gaze shifted from the intercom to the apartment door. They were making sure we stayed exactly where they expected to find us. Adrian did not answer the intercom. The silence itself became his response. The polite voice repeated the request once more, then disappeared as if whoever stood downstairs had already expected to be ignored. I realized something that made my stomach tighten. They were not checking whether anyone was home. They already knew we were. Adrian picked up Daniel's envelope and slid the photograph, the financial records, and the flash drive back inside with careful precision. Then he looked at me. If they enter this apartment, these stay with you. I frowned. You should take them. They are after you now too. He shook his head once. No. They are after the evidence. If I carry it, they know exactly where to look. Before I could argue, Vanessa stepped forward. Then divide it. Both of us turned toward her. She reached for a blank notepad lying beside my bookshelf and tore off 3 sheets. Nobody should leave here carrying everything. Adrian watched her for a moment before giving a slight nod. Within minutes, the contents of the envelope had been separated. Adrian memorized several account numbers before returning the papers to me. Vanessa photographed one page with her phone before deleting the image from the device and writing the numbers by hand instead. The flash drive disappeared into the inside pocket of my old denim jacket hanging beside the door. Looking at the nearly empty envelope, it suddenly occurred to me that the truth no longer existed in one place. It now lived inside 3 different people who had barely known one another 24 hours earlier. Adrian's phone vibrated again. This time it was a secure message from Marcus. The security cameras covering the rear alley had gone offline exactly 11 minutes earlier. Adrian typed only 4 words in reply. Do not restore them. I looked at him in surprise. Why would you leave them off? He slipped the phone away. Because whoever disabled them is expecting us to turn them back on. I would rather they believe their plan is working. Another soft chime echoed from the intercom downstairs. This time no voice followed. Only silence. Then, somewhere in the hallway outside my apartment, an elevator door opened. We listened as footsteps crossed the corridor at an unhurried pace. They stopped directly outside my door. No knock came. No one spoke. Whoever stood there remained perfectly still. Seconds stretched into nearly a full minute before the footsteps quietly moved away again. I released a breath I had not realized I was holding. Vanessa looked visibly unsettled. Why would they leave? Adrian answered calmly. To see whether fear convinces us to leave instead. His words made perfect sense, yet somehow they were even more unsettling. Whoever was outside understood human behavior almost as well as Adrian did. I walked toward the kitchen sink to pour a glass of water, but my attention caught on something reflected in the window. Across the narrow street, inside the second floor of a closed bookstore, someone had pulled one blind slightly out of place. Through the gap, sunlight flashed briefly against what looked like a camera lens. I froze. Adrian. He joined me without looking directly toward the bookstore. I see it. How long have they been there? Long enough to watch every entrance to this building. Vanessa slowly closed the kitchen curtain. Then there is no safe way out. Adrian remained silent for several moments before speaking. There is no invisible way out. That is different. He reached into his jacket and removed the keys to his black sedan, placing them on the table beside the empty envelope. Whoever is watching expects all 3 of us to leave together. I looked at him, confused. We are not. A faint smile crossed his face, the kind that appeared only when he had already decided something. No. We are going to give them exactly what they think they are seeing. Before either Vanessa or I could ask what he meant, my phone vibrated with a message from an unfamiliar number. It contained only a single sentence. The man you trust cancelled a wedding this morning. Ask yourself what else he is willing to sacrifice before tonight ends. The anonymous message stayed on my screen, but I stopped reading the words after the first sentence. Instead, I looked at Adrian. He had not asked what the message said. He had not reached for my phone. He simply waited, as though he understood that trust could never be demanded. It had to be chosen. I slowly locked the screen and slipped the phone into my pocket. I am not asking, I said quietly. Good, Adrian replied. Because if they are trying to divide us, explaining myself only helps them. There was no offense in his voice. Only certainty. For the first time since this impossible day had begun, I realized something unexpected. Adrian never tried to convince people he was trustworthy. He simply kept making decisions that gave other people the freedom to decide for themselves. Vanessa glanced toward the apartment door before speaking. If they are watching every entrance, they expect someone to panic eventually. Adrian nodded. Exactly. He picked up his car keys again and placed them inside my hand instead of his own. In 5 minutes, Marcus will arrive driving my sedan. Everyone watching this building already knows that vehicle belongs to me. I frowned. But you just gave me the keys. Because Marcus will not be using them. Confusion crossed both my face and Vanessa's. Adrian finally allowed himself the smallest hint of a smile. There are 3 identical Callahan security sedans in Chicago. Only one belongs to me. The plan unfolded almost immediately in my mind. Whoever watched the apartment would assume Adrian had entered the familiar black sedan. They would follow the wrong vehicle while the real movement happened somewhere else. Vanessa looked genuinely impressed. How many people know about the identical cars? Marcus, Adrian answered. Now the 2 of you. A soft vibration interrupted us once more. This time it came from the flash drive hidden inside my jacket pocket. At first I thought I had imagined it, but then I remembered the jacket also contained my old cell phone, a device I had not used in months because its battery barely held a charge. I removed it carefully. The screen had somehow powered itself on. A single notification waited on the lock screen. One new voicemail. My pulse quickened. That phone has not been connected in weeks, I whispered. Adrian immediately looked toward the device. Play it. I pressed the speaker icon. Static filled the apartment for several long seconds before a familiar voice emerged, distant but unmistakable. Elliot, if you are hearing this, then they finally found the envelope. Every breath caught in my chest. Daniel, I whispered. His voice continued, calm despite the interference. Do not follow anyone who claims they can bring you to me. If I disappear, it is because I chose to disappear. The documents matter more than finding me. Remember what I taught you. When every door seems locked, stop looking for the door. Look for the person carrying the key. The recording ended with another burst of static. No explanation. No location. Only silence. I stood frozen, unable to speak. Adrian gently took the old phone and turned it over in his hand. This voicemail was delayed, he said quietly. It was never meant to arrive today. Vanessa looked toward him. Then why now? Adrian examined the notification one final time before answering. Because whoever controlled the network lost access to it. His phone rang before anyone could. Ask another question. Marcus spoke the instant Adrian answered. The decoy vehicle just left the block. Every surveillance team followed it. Adrian closed his eyes briefly, almost in relief. Good. Maintain the route. Marcus continued speaking, and this time Adrian's expression changed in a way I had never seen before. Not fear. Surprise. He lowered the phone slowly after the call ended. What happened? I asked. Adrian looked directly at me. Someone walked into Callahan headquarters 10 minutes ago carrying valid executive credentials. My heartbeat echoed in the quiet apartment. Who? Adrian's voice remained steady, but every word landed like a stone. According to security records, Daniel Hayes just signed himself into my building.